The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Montana Territory as Harriet Everett bolted from the makeshift altar, her white wedding dress billowing behind her like a storm cloud against the cerulean sky of 1875. Tears streamed down her face, the bitter taste of betrayal on her lips as she ran toward the only freedom she had ever known, the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the American frontier. Harriet. The deep voice of Wade Kincaid carried on the wind, but she refused to look back, refused to face the man who had promised her the world only to sell her future to the highest bidder. The small mining town of Silver Creek faded behind her as Harriet pushed her legs harder, hitching up her cumbersome dress to better navigate the rugged terrain. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, but the thought of returning to that church, to the business arrangement disguised as a wedding, filled her with more dread than the wilderness ever could. Wade's horse thundered across the ground as he pursued her, his expression grim beneath the brim of his Stetson. At 32, he had spent 15 years as a cowboy, rangeland in his blood and determination in his heart. He had weathered droughts and blizzards, rustlers and outlaws, but nothing had prepared him for the stubbornness of Harriet Everett, the woman who had stolen his heart 3 years ago and now fled from their wedding day as if the hounds of hell nipped at her heels. Harriet, stop. Wade called out, closing the distance between them. You're going to hurt yourself. But Harriet pressed on, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stumbled over the uneven ground. She had spent 22 years following orders, first her father's, then her uncle's after her parents died. When Wade Kincaid had appeared in Silver Creek last year, she thought him different. His gentle words and kind eyes had made her believe in possibilities beyond the suffocating confines of her uncle's general store. Until she'd overheard them last night, Wade and her uncle discussing her future as if she were a prized mare, her uncle boasting about the debts Wade would absorb by taking her off his hands. I trusted you. She shouted over her shoulder, not slowing her pace even as rocks cut into her silk slippers. I will not be sold like cattle. Wade spurred his horse forward, the powerful chestnut stallion quickly gaining ground. With a swift movement born from years on the range, he leaned from the saddle and caught Harriet around the waist, lifting her off her feet in one fluid motion. She struggled against him, pounding her fists against his chest as he settled her across his lap. Let me go. She demanded, her voice breaking. I heard everything, you and Uncle Frederick discussing the arrangement as if I were property to be traded. Wade held her firmly but gently, keeping his horse at a steady pace as they moved farther from town. Is that what you think? That I'd marry you to settle a debt? I heard you. Harriet's blue eyes flashed with fury and hurt. $500 to take me off his hands and clear his gambling debts to you, as if I were no more than a business transaction. Wade's weathered face softened as understanding dawned. He guided his horse toward a copse of cottonwood trees beside a small creek, one of the few places of beauty and shade in the otherwise harsh landscape. When they reached the water's edge, he dismounted, lifting Harriet down despite her protests. Now you listen to me, Harriet Everett, he said, his voice low and serious. Your uncle owes me nothing. I never gambled with him a day in my life. Harriet wrapped her arms around herself, her wedding dress now dirty and torn at the hem. I know what I heard. You heard half a conversation, Wade countered. The $500 was me paying him, not the other way around. Confusion crossed Harriet's face. Paying him for what? Wade ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration she'd come to recognize over the months of their courtship. For the store. I bought his mercantile so he could pay off his debts and leave town, which is what he's wanted to do since your aunt died. He didn't want to leave you with nothing, so part of our arrangement was that I'd take care of you. Take care of me, Harriet echoed, her voice hollow. Not like that, Wade said quickly. I told him I intended to court you proper, to marry you if you'd have me. The store was going to be my wedding gift to you, something that's yours alone, that no one can take away. Harriet stared at him, uncertainty warring with the hurt and anger that had propelled her flight. "Why wouldn't you tell me this? Your uncle wanted to tell you himself, after the wedding. He thought you'd refuse to let him go if you knew he was leaving, that you'd insist on caring for him like you have these past 5 years." The truth of his words struck her like a physical blow. She had devoted herself to her uncle's care after her aunt's passing, putting aside her own dreams of independence, of perhaps one day having a family of her own. "I would have," she admitted softly. Wade took a tentative step toward her. "I know. That's why I agreed to his plan, even though it didn't sit right with me to keep you in the dark. I love you, Harriet. I have since the moment you threw that pitcher of water in my face when I tracked mud into the store." Despite herself, Harriet felt the corner of her mouth twitch at the memory. "You ruined an entire bolt of calico. Worth every penny to see that fire in your eyes," Wade said, a smile softening his features. "The same fire I see now." Harriet's shoulders slumped, the adrenaline of her escape fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Wade closed the distance between them, his hands gentle as they clasped hers. "Believe this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We were married in my soul long ago, Harriet Everett. From the moment you stood up to Jackson Tyler when he was mistreating that Indian boy in the street. From the day you spent your last dollar buying medicine for old Mrs. Hatcher, I knew you were the woman I would spend my life with." Tears welled in Harriet's eyes, not of anger now but of confusion and a tentative hope. "Why didn't you just tell me about the store, about Uncle Frederick leaving?" "Because I'm a damn fool who thought he was doing the right thing," Wade admitted. "I've spent most of my life on the move, following the herds and the seasons. I'm not good with words or feelings, but I know what I want, and that's you, Harriet. Not because of any arrangement or obligation, but because you're the bravest, most compassionate woman I've ever known." Harriet looked up at him, studying the sincerity in his hazel eyes, the worry lines etched into his tanned face. In the year since Wade had arrived in Silver Creek, he had proven himself a man of integrity, defending the weak and standing up to the powerful mining interests that threatened to consume the town. Could she have misjudged his intentions so completely? "I don't want to be owned," she said finally. "Not by my uncle, not by you, not by anyone." "I don't want to own you," Wade replied. "I want to stand beside you to build something together that neither of us could create alone." A gust of wind swept through the cottonwoods, sending a shower of leaves spiraling around them. Harriet closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past hours, the past years pressing down on her. "I need time," she said at last. "Time to think, to understand what I truly want." Wade nodded, the disappointment evident in his eyes even as he respected her request. "I understand. I'll take you back to town, not to the church, but to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house if you'd prefer." Harriet glanced down at her ruined wedding dress, then back at the direction of Silver Creek, where a church full of people awaited their return. The thought of facing their curious stares, their whispered judgments, sent a wave of anxiety through her. "No," she decided, "not back to town, not yet." Wade raised an eyebrow. "Where then?" "My parents' old homestead," Harriet said, the idea forming as she spoke. "It's been abandoned since they died, but the cabin should still be standing. It's a day's ride north." "Alone?" Wade asked, concern evident in his voice. "With you," Harriet clarified. "I need answers that I won't find in town surrounded by gossip and expectations. I need to remember who I am away from Uncle Frederick's influence." Wade studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll need supplies. There's a trapper's cabin about an hour's ride from here where we can get what we need for the journey." As they mounted Wade's horse, Harriet sitting sideways in front of him due to her dress, she felt a strange sense of rightness despite the tumultuous events of the day. For the first time in years, she was making her own choice, forging her own path. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon as they reached the trapper's cabin, a small but sturdy structure nestled against a rocky outcropping. The owner, a grizzled old mountain man named Jeremiah, greeted Wade like an old friend. "Ain't this a sight?" Jeremiah chuckled, eyeing Harriet's bedraggled wedding dress. "You finally convince a woman to marry you, Kincaid, and you can't even get her to the church on time. It's complicated," Wade replied with a wry smile. "We need supplies for a few days." Heading up to the old Everett place, Jeremiah's bushy eyebrows rose. "Been years since anyone lived there. Place might not be in the best shape." "It's where I need to be," Harriet said firmly. The old trapper nodded, recognizing the determination in her voice. "Well then, let's get you what you need." While Wade negotiated for supplies, Jeremiah's wife, a kind-faced woman named Martha, took Harriet aside and offered her a change of clothes. "Can't be riding cross-country in that wedding finery, dear," she said, presenting Harriet with a simple skirt and blouse. "These belonged to my daughter before she moved east with her husband. Should fit you well enough." Grateful for the older woman's kindness, Harriet changed in the small back room of the cabin, carefully folding her wedding dress despite its damaged state. When she emerged in the practical clothes, she felt lighter somehow, as if she'd shed more than just the constraining garment. They set out again as the afternoon waned, their saddlebags filled with provisions for several days. Wade had traded for a second horse, a gentle mare that Harriet could ride, allowing them to make better time. As they rode side by side through the rolling foothills, the tension between them gradually eased, replaced by a comfortable silence broken only by Wade's occasional directions or comments about the changing landscape. By nightfall, they had covered significant ground but were still several hours from the Everett homestead. Wade found a sheltered hollow beside a small stream where they made camp for the night. As Harriet helped gather firewood, she found herself studying Wade when he wasn't looking, the careful way he tended the horses, the efficiency with which he built their fire, the respect he showed for the land around them. "You're staring," Wade said without turning, his hands busy preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork. Harriet flushed, caught in her observation. "I'm trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one before me now." Wade looked up then, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "I'm the same man I've always been, Harriet. Imperfect, sometimes foolish, but honest in what matters most." "And what matters most?" she asked softly, keeping my word, "protecting those who can't protect themselves." He paused, his gaze holding hers across the flames. "Loving you the way you deserve to be loved." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, neither challenge nor demand but a truth laid bare. Harriet found herself without a ready response, her heart and mind at odds over what to believe. They ate their meal mostly in silence, the crackling fire and distant coyote calls providing the only soundtrack to their thoughts. As Harriet prepared for sleep, Wade fashioned a barrier of saddlebags and blankets between their bedrolls, a gesture of respect that touched her more than flowery words might have. "Thank you," she said as she settled beneath her blanket, the stars a glittering canopy above them. Wade nodded, understanding she meant more than just the meal or the makeshift privacy screen. "Get some rest. We'll reach your family's place by midday tomorrow." Sleep came surprisingly easily to Harriet despite the hard ground and tumultuous day. Perhaps it was the open sky above her or the knowledge that for this moment, at least, she was charting her own course. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the gentle nicker of horses. Harriet woke to find Wade already up, tending the fire and brewing coffee in a battered tin pot. The domestic scene struck her with unexpected force. How natural it seemed, how right, despite the circumstances that had brought them here. "Morning," Wade greeted, handing her a steaming cup. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," Harriet admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. The warmth seeped into her hands, chasing away the morning chill. "I haven't slept under the stars since I was a child when my father would take me fishing at the lake." Wade smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Your father was a good man. One of the few who treated me fair when I first came through these parts as a young ranch hand." Surprised, Harriet looked up sharply. You knew my father? Wade nodded, settling beside her with his own cup. I was 17, working my first cattle drive. Got separated from the herd during a storm, ended up half drowned and lost. Your father found me, took me in until I could rejoin my outfit. Never forgot his kindness. I never knew, Harriet whispered, this new connection to her past sending a ripple of emotion through her. He never mentioned you. No reason he should have. I was just one of many passing through. Wade's gaze turned thoughtful. But I remembered him, remembered this valley. It's part of why I came back to Silver Creek when I had the chance to settle somewhere. The revelation shifted something in Harriet's perception. Was it possible that Wade's appearance in her life hadn't been random chance, but something more like destiny? They broke camp efficiently, continuing their journey as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. The landscape grew more familiar to Harriet with each passing mile, the distinctive outcropping of rocks that resembled a sleeping bear, the grove of aspen trees where she had once discovered a fawn hidden in the tall grass, the meandering creek that eventually fed into the larger river near town. When they crested the final ridge and the Everett homestead came into view, Harriet's breath caught in her throat. The small cabin stood much as she remembered it, though weathered by 10 years of neglect. The barn had partially collapsed, and the once neat fields had long since returned to prairie grass. But the essence of her childhood home remained. Wade dismounted first, offering a hand to help Harriet down from her mare. She hesitated only briefly before accepting his assistance, her feet touching the ground of her family's land for the first time in a decade. "It's smaller than I remembered," she said softly, taking in the cabin with its sagging porch and faded logs. "Most things from childhood are," Wade replied, understanding in his voice. "Want to go inside?" Harriet nodded, moving forward with tentative steps. The door creaked on rusted hinges as she pushed it open, revealing the single room that had once housed her family. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the grimy windows, illuminating the sparse furnishings that remained a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, the iron bedstead where her parents had slept. Wade remained respectfully at the threshold as Harriet moved through the space, her fingers trailing over surfaces embedded with memories. The wooden shelf where her mother had kept her few precious books, the corner where her father's rocking chair had stood, the small alcove where her own bed had been positioned. They were so happy here, she said, more to herself than to Wade. Even with all the hardships, the droughts and the harsh winters, they were happy because they were together, building something that was truly theirs. Wade leaned against the doorframe, watching her with quiet attention. "That's all I want with you, Harriet. Not ownership, but partnership. The chance to build something together." Harriet turned to face him, the dust of the past settling around her as she contemplated the future. "I believed you once. I want to believe you again." "Then ask me anything," Wade offered. "No more secrets, no more misunderstandings, just the truth, plain and simple." Harriet considered this, then gestured for him to enter the cabin. He did so, removing his hat as a sign of respect for the space and what it meant to her. They sat at the old table, facing each other across a decade of Harriet's absence and a day of shattered expectations. "Why did you really buy Uncle Frederick's store?" she asked, starting with the question that had set everything in motion. "Because I saw how it was killing you," Wade answered without hesitation. "You were working yourself to exhaustion keeping that place running while your uncle drank away the profits. I wanted to give you the chance to make it what it could be, what you could make it, without his shadow hanging over you." Harriet nodded slowly, accepting the truth she heard in his voice. "And the wedding, was that your idea or his?" A flush crept up Wade's neck. "The wedding was my desire from the moment I knew I loved you. The timing was influenced by your uncle's plans to leave, I won't deny that. He wanted to see you settled before he went." "Settled," Harriet repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "As if I were a problem to be solved." "To him, perhaps," Wade conceded. "To me, you're the solution to a lifetime of wandering, of never belonging anywhere or to anyone. The rawness of his admission touched something deep within Harriet. "I need to know one more thing," she said after a moment. "If I had said no to your proposal, would you still have bought the store? Would you still have helped my uncle leave?" Wade met her gaze unflinchingly. "Yes, because it was the right thing to do, regardless of what was between us. I would have found a way to ensure the store remained yours, even if you never wanted to see me again." In that moment, Harriet believed him completely. The pieces fell into place, not a betrayal, but a misunderstanding born of good intentions poorly executed. Wade Kincaid was not the man she had feared yesterday, but the one she had come to love over the past year, honorable, steadfast, and committed to her happiness even at the cost of his own. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like to start over." Hope kindled in Wade's eyes. "What do you mean?" Harriet rose from the table, extending her hand to him as if they were meeting for the first time. "My name is Harriet Everett. I'm the proprietor of a general store in Silver Creek, and I'm not looking to be anyone's wife unless it's on terms of complete equality and honest partnership." Wade stood, taking her hand in his calloused one. Wade Kincaid, former cowboy, current admirer of strong-willed women who know their own minds. "I'm offering my heart, my name, and my solemn promise to never make decisions for you, only with you." Their hands remained clasped, the simple touch conveying more than elaborate declarations might have. Outside, the wind whispered through the prairie grass, a sound that had formed the backdrop to Harriet's earliest memories. "This place," she said, looking around the cabin. "It could be something again, with work, with care." Wade followed her gaze, seeing not what was but what could be. "We could rebuild it together, a place of our own, away from town but close enough to manage the store." "Our store," Harriet corrected, the first tentative step toward the partnership he had proposed. "Our store," Wade agreed with a smile. They spent the remainder of the day cleaning the cabin as best they could with their limited supplies, making it habitable for their temporary stay. As they worked side by side, Harriet found herself watching Wade the careful way he reinforced a loose board in the porch, his thoughtfulness in hanging her wedding dress where it could air out, the respect with which he handled the few remaining possessions of her parents. That evening, as they sat on the porch steps watching the sunset paint the prairie in hues of gold and crimson, Harriet felt a sense of peace settle over her. The frantic bride who had fled the church seemed like someone else entirely, a stranger whose fears had nearly cost Harriet her chance at happiness. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, his shoulder a warm presence against hers. "That sometimes running away can actually lead you home," she answered truthfully. Wade's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Does that mean you might consider finishing what we started yesterday, perhaps not right away, but someday?" Harriet turned to look at him, this man who had pursued her not to possess her, but to protect her right to choose her own path. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like to be married here in this place, where my parents built their life together, where we could begin ours." The joy that suffused Wade's features was answer enough, but he spoke the words anyway. "Nothing would honor me more than to make our vows here when you're ready." "Not when," Harriet corrected gently. "Now, today, with only the sky as our witness and our own hearts as testament." Wade's surprise was evident. "Are you certain, after everything that happened?" "I ran from a wedding that felt like a transaction," Harriet explained. "Not from you, not from us. What we have, what we could build together, that's worth vowing to protect." They stood together as the last light of day gilded the landscape. With no minister or guests, no music or fancy trappings, they spoke promises that came not from tradition but from their own hearts. "I, Wade Kincaid, take you as my partner in all things," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I promise to respect your independence even as I cherish our connection, to build with you, dream with you, and face whatever comes alongside you. We were married in my soul long ago, Harriet Everett, but today I make that truth known to the heavens above and the earth beneath our feet." Tears welled in Harriet's eyes, not of sorrow or confusion now, but of certainty and joy. I, Harriet Everett, choose you as my companion through all of life's journeys. I promise to speak my truth, to listen to yours, and to forge a path that honors both. My heart recognizes yours as its home, not as a place of confinement, but as a source of strength and belonging. As the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky, Wade drew Harriet into his arms, sealing their private vows with a kiss that held the promise of all the tomorrows they would build together. 6 months later, the Everett homestead stood transformed. The cabin had been repaired and expanded, the fields partially reclaimed for a garden and small orchard. In town, the general store flourished under their joint management, with Harriet introducing innovations that had increased their business substantially. On a crisp autumn afternoon, they hosted a gathering to celebrate their official wedding, a formality for the community, but a joyous affirmation of the commitment they had made to each other that sunset on the porch. Friends from Silver Creek mingled in the yard, marveling at what the couple had accomplished in such a short time. "You've created something special here," Mrs. Henderson remarked, surveying the homestead with approval. "Both of you." Harriet smiled, her hand resting comfortably in the crook of Wade's arm. "We're just getting started." As the celebration continued around them, Wade led Harriet to a quiet corner of the property, where a single apple tree, the first they had planted together, stood bearing its initial small harvest. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. A wedding gift, though perhaps a bit late. Curious, Harriet unwrapped it to reveal a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. On the first page, Wade had written a single line: "The Chronicles of Harriet and Wade Kincaid, a partnership. For our story," he explained, "past, present, and future." Harriet traced the words with her fingertip, overwhelmed by the simplicity and perfection of the gift. "Our story," she echoed. "The one that almost didn't happen." Wade shook his head, drawing her close. "The one that was always meant to be, even when we took the longest way around to find it." As they rejoined their guests, Harriet caught sight of her wedding dress, now carefully altered and worn by her for this official ceremony. From that desperate flight across the prairie, to this moment of celebration, surrounded by friends, and the home they were building together, the journey had been unexpected, but had led exactly where she needed to be. In the years that followed, the journal filled with entries the expansion of their business ventures, the birth of their children, the challenges and triumphs that formed the tapestry of their shared life. And on each anniversary of that sunset ceremony, they read together the vows they had created, renewing the promises that had transformed a runaway bride and a persistent cowboy into partners in the truest sense of the word. They had indeed been married in each other's souls long before any ceremony, bound by a connection that had withstood misunderstanding and doubt to emerge stronger, more resilient, and infinitely more precious for having been tested and proven true.